Winter came to Black Hollow like a punishment, the kind of cold that made your teeth ache before you even stepped outside, the kind that turned spit to ice before it hit the ground and made every breath feel like swallowing broken glass. Out past the town limits, where civilization gave up and the wilderness took over, Ash Ridge Ranch sprawled across the frozen landscape like the skeleton of something that used to be magnificent. It was still the biggest cattle operation in 3 counties, still profitable enough to keep running. But anyone with eyes could see the truth. The place was dying from the inside out. Rowan Hale had made sure of that, not intentionally, not through neglect or stupidity, but through the simple act of closing himself off so completely that the ranch had started to mirror its owner, cold, efficient, and utterly without warmth. The ranch hands whispered about him when they thought he couldn't hear, called him the scarred devil, said his heart had frozen solid the day they buried his wife 6 years back, and that nothing would ever thaw it again. They respected him, feared him even, but nobody got close. Not anymore. "Boss wants his coffee," Jake Monroe muttered, stomping snow off his boots outside the main house. He was talking to nobody in particular, just filling the silence that seemed to smother everything at Ash Ridge. "Then make it yourself," Tom Brewster shot back without looking up from the saddle he was repairing. "I ain't his goddamn servant." "Neither am I." "Then I guess he's drinking it cold." They both laughed, but it was the tired kind of laughter men make when they're too worn down to care anymore. The truth was, nobody wanted to go into that house. It felt like walking into a tomb. Inside, Rowan sat at the long dining table that could seat 20 but only ever held 1. The wood was scarred from decades of use, dark with age and countless meals. Plates and glasses lined the shelves, gathering dust. The kitchen sat empty and cold. He ate the same thing every morning: hardtack, jerky, and whatever vegetables hadn't rotted in the root cellar. No coffee, because nobody had made any. No warmth, because he didn't want it. At 34 years old, Rowan Hale looked like a man who'd been carved from granite. 6'3", broad through the shoulders, with hands that could break a man's jaw or gentle a spooked horse, depending on what the situation required. The scar running from his left ear down to his jawline only made him look more dangerous. He'd gotten it breaking up a knife fight in a saloon 5 years back, and he wore it like a warning. Don't get close, don't ask questions, don't expect mercy. His eyes were the worst part, gray as winter sky and just as empty. The front door banged open without warning. Silas Boone stepped inside, shaking snow from his hat. He was Rowan's foreman, had been for 8 years, and the only man on the ranch who didn't seem afraid of the boss. Mostly because Silas was mean enough that fear didn't stick to him proper. "Got a problem," Silas announced. Rowan didn't look up from his breakfast. "When don't we?" "This one's different." Silas pulled out a chair and sat down without being invited. "Martha's gone." That got Rowan's attention. Martha Grimes had been the ranch cook for 3 years. Older woman, widow, kept to herself but did the job without complaint. "Gone where?" "Dead." Silas said it flat, like he was reporting a broken fence post. "Died yesterday afternoon. Heart gave out while she was kneading bread dough. Found her face down in the flour bin." Rowan set down his fork. "You tell the others?" "Didn't see the point. Woman kept to herself. Nobody's gonna mourn her particular." "We need a new cook." "That's the problem I'm talking about." Silas leaned back, hooking his thumbs through his belt loops. "Nobody wants to work out here. Word's gotten around that Ash Ridge ain't exactly a friendly place. We're 30 miles from town in the dead of winter. Any cook worth hiring already got better offers." "Post a notice anyway." "Already did. 3 days ago when Martha first took sick. Got exactly 1 response." Rowan waited. Silas smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Mabel Mercer wants the job." The name meant nothing to Rowan. "Who?" "Martha's daughter. Well, stepdaughter. Martha married Cyrus Mercer about 15 years back, took on his kid from his first marriage. Cyrus died last year, left them with nothing but debts. Martha came out here to work, sent money back to the girl and her mother in town." He paused. "The mother's sick now. Dying, probably. So the daughter wants to take over Martha's position." "Can she cook?" "Don't know. Don't care." Silas picked at something under his fingernails. "You ain't gonna hire her anyway." "Why not?" "Because she's fat as a prize hog and half as pretty." Rowan's jaw tightened. He didn't like Silas particularly, but the man ran the ranch efficiently and wasn't afraid to make hard decisions. Still, There were moments when Rowan wondered if keeping him on was worth the constant stream of poison that came out of his mouth. "She can cook, she gets the job," Rowan said. "I don't give a damn what she looks like." "The men will. The men will eat what's put in front of them or go hungry. Their choice." Silas shrugged. "Suit yourself. She'll be here this morning. Rode out before dawn." He stood up, headed for the door, then paused. "One more thing. Girl's got a reputation. Town folks say she's slow. Maybe a little touched in the head. Just so you know what you're getting." After Silas left, Rowan sat alone in the silent house and wondered, not for the first time, when exactly his life had become this small and this mean. The answer, of course, was the day Anna died. He didn't let himself think about her often. Didn't see the point. She was gone, buried on the hill overlooking the ranch, and all the thinking in the world wouldn't change that. But sometimes, in the quiet moments between tasks, he'd catch himself turning to tell her something before remembering. Or he'd smell something, lavender, maybe, or fresh bread. And for half a heartbeat, he'd forget she was dead. Those moments were worse than the grief. They were small, cruel reminders that life used to be different. Anna had filled this house with noise and warmth and laughter. She'd made the ranch hands feel like family instead of hired muscle. She'd turned meals into celebrations and ordinary days into something worth remembering. And when she died giving birth to a son who didn't survive the night, Rowan had locked every bit of that warmth away and never looked back. The clock on the mantel ticked toward 7. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows in their frames. Snow fell in thick sheets, turning the world white and formless. It was the kind of weather that killed unprepared travelers, the kind that made smart folks stay inside and wait it out. So when Rowan heard hoofbeats coming up the long drive, he assumed it was one of the ranch hands coming back from checking the fence lines. But when he looked out the window, he saw something else entirely. A woman on horseback, riding through the storm like it was nothing more than an inconvenience. She wore a heavy coat that looked 2 sizes too small, and her horse, a tired-looking mare that had seen better days, moved slow but steady through the snow. Rowan watched her approach with something close to curiosity. It had been months since anyone new had come to Ash Ridge, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd seen a woman ride through weather like this alone. She dismounted with effort, her boots sinking deep into the snow. Even from a distance, Rowan could see what Silas had meant. The woman was heavy, not just solid or sturdy, but genuinely fat in a way that made movement look difficult. Her face was round and red from the cold, her hair pulled back in a practical bun that had come half undone during the ride. She tied her horse to the hitching post, then turned toward the house, and stopped. For a long moment, she just stood there in the snow, staring at the building like she was gathering courage. Her breath came out in white clouds. Her hands, wrapped in fingerless gloves, were shaking. Rowan found himself wondering what it took to make someone ride 30 miles through a blizzard for a job they might not even get. What kind of desperation did that require? Then she started walking, and he moved away from the window. The knock came 30 seconds later. 3 sharp raps that somehow managed to sound apologetic. Rowan opened the door. Up close, she looked younger than he'd expected. Mid-20s, maybe. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they darted nervously from his face to the ground and back again. She had the look of someone who expected rejection before she even opened her mouth. "Mr. Hale?" Her voice was soft, uncertain. "My name is Mabel Mercer. I'm here about the cooking position." Rowan stepped aside without a word, gesturing for her to come in. She hesitated, actually hesitated, like she thought it might be a trap. Then she stepped across the threshold, bringing a gust of cold air and snow with her. "You rode all the way from Black Hollow?" Rowan asked, closing the door behind her. "Yes, sir." "In this weather? Didn't seem smart to wait. Thought you might need someone right away. What with Martha passing and all." She wouldn't look at him directly. Her eyes kept sliding away, focusing on the walls, the floor, anywhere but his face. "You knew Martha?" "She was my stepmother, raised me after my father died." "Sorry for your loss." Mabel didn't respond to that, just stood there dripping melted snow onto the floorboards, her whole body tense like she was ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. Rowan studied her for a moment. She wore homespun clothes that had been mended multiple times, boots that were more patches than leather, and that too small coat that barely buttoned across her middle. Everything about her screamed poverty, the kind of bone-deep, grinding poverty that didn't just affect what you wore but how you carried yourself. Silas said your mother's sick, Rowan said finally. Yes, sir, consumption. Doctor says she's got maybe a few months left, if that. And you think working out here is going to help her somehow? For the first time, Mabel's eyes snapped up to meet his. There was a flash of something in them, anger maybe, or desperation sharp enough to cut through the fear. I think the money from this job will buy her medicine and keep a roof over her head until she passes, Mabel said quietly. After that, I don't know what I'll do. But at least she'll die comfortable. It was the most direct thing she'd said since arriving, and Rowan found himself reassessing. Maybe she wasn't as timid as she appeared. You know how to cook? He asked. Yes, sir. For how many? However many you need. I got 15 ranch hands. They eat like starving dogs. Breakfast before dawn, dinner at midday, supper after dark, plus whatever else they want in between. I can handle that. Kitchen's been cold for 3 days. Everything's a mess. No firewood stacked, no supplies organized, no meal plan laid out. I'll figure it out. Rowan crossed his arms. I ain't running a charity, Miss Mercer. You fail at this job, you're gone. I don't care about your sick mother or your hard luck story. I need someone who can do the work without drama. You understand? She nodded once, sharp and definite. Give me 1 day. If I can't do it, I'll leave before sundown. 1 day? 1 day. There was something in her voice, not confidence exactly, but a kind of stubborn determination that reminded Rowan of his own father. The old man had been the same way, too proud to quit even when common sense said he should. All right, Rowan said after a moment. You got your 1 day. Kitchen's through there. He pointed toward the back of the house. Supplies in the pantry, wood by the back door. Breakfast is in 2 hours. Don't disappoint me. Mabel nodded again and moved toward the kitchen without another word. Rowan watched her go, then grabbed his coat and headed outside to tell the men they had a new cook. He found most of them in the barn, trying to stay warm while they waited for breakfast that wasn't coming. When he told them about Mabel, the reaction was exactly what he'd expected. Jake Monroe laughed out loud. Martha's girl? The fat one? That's her. Boss, no offense, but have you seen that woman? She can barely walk without wheezing. How's she supposed to cook for 15 men? That's what we're going to find out. Tom Brewster, older and meaner than the rest, spat tobacco juice into the straw. This is what happens when you let desperation make your decisions. We'll be eating burned slop by tomorrow. Then you'll go hungry, Rowan said flatly. She's got 1 day to prove herself. After that, we'll see. Till then, any man who gives her trouble answers to me. Clear? Nobody argued. They knew better. But as Rowan walked back toward the house, he could hear them laughing behind his back, making jokes, placing bets on how long the fat girl would last before she broke down crying and begged to go home. He told himself he didn't care. Inside the kitchen, Mabel stood perfectly still, taking everything in. The room was chaos. Dirty dishes piled in the wash basin, flour and sugar scattered across the counters, the cast iron stove cold and full of old ash, vegetables rotting in baskets, meat hanging in the cold room, some of it starting to turn. For a long moment, she didn't move, just stood there breathing hard, her face pale with what might have been panic. Then she took off her coat, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. First the stove. She cleaned out the ash, loaded fresh wood, and got a fire going. While it heated, she hauled water from the pump outside. 4 trips, each one leaving her gasping and sweating despite the freezing temperature. Then the dishes. She washed everything in boiling water, scrubbing until her hands turned red and raw. Then the counters, the floors, the shelves. By the time the sun started to rise, the kitchen looked almost civilized again. Mabel stood in the middle of the room, breathing hard, her dress soaked with sweat. Her hair had come completely loose from its bun, hanging in damp strands around her face. She looked exhausted. But the kitchen was clean, the stove was hot, and she still had an hour before breakfast. She went to the pantry and started pulling supplies. Flour, eggs, salt pork, dried beans, cornmeal, butter, molasses, dried apples. Her hands moved with surprising confidence now, the fear and uncertainty from earlier replaced by something that looked almost like focus. She made cornbread first, mixing the batter by hand and pouring it into cast iron skillets. While that baked, she started on the bacon, thick slices that sizzled and popped in the pan, filling the kitchen with the smell of rendered fat and smoke. Then the beans, Slow cooked with salt pork and molasses until they turned soft and sweet. Then fried eggs cooked in bacon grease until the edges turned crispy and golden. Then biscuits, rolled out and cut by hand, brushed with butter before going into the oven. By the time Rowan came back inside, the kitchen smelled like something out of a dream he'd forgotten he had. He stood in the doorway, just breathing it in. Mabel was at the stove, her face flushed from the heat, moving between pans with the kind of practiced efficiency that only came from years of experience. She looked up when she heard him, and for half a second their eyes met. "It's ready," she said quietly. "Should I bring it out, or do they come in here?" "They come in," Rowan said. "Usually." "All right." He went to get the men. They came in slowly, skeptical and hungry, tracking snow and mud across the clean floors. When they saw the table, covered with platters of food, steam rising from everything, the cornbread still golden from the oven, they stopped talking. "Well," Jake said finally, "I'll be damned." They sat down without another word. Rowan watched them eat. Watched the way their faces changed from suspicious to surprised to genuinely pleased. Watched them go back for seconds, then thirds. Watched the platters empty and the conversation start to flow. For the first time in 6 years, Ash Ridge Ranch felt almost alive. Mabel stayed in the kitchen, washing dishes and staying out of sight. She didn't ask for praise or acknowledgement, didn't try to insert herself into the conversation. She just worked. When the men finished and filed back outside, Rowan lingered. He found Mabel scrubbing out the last of the pans, her shoulders hunched with exhaustion. "That was good," he said. She didn't turn around. "Thank you, sir." "Better than good, actually. I'm glad." "Where'd you learn to cook like that?" "My mother. Before she got sick, she worked in the hotel in Black Hollow. Taught me everything she knew." Rowan nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "You got the job, permanent. Same pay Martha was getting, plus room and board." Mabel's hands stilled in the wash basin. For a moment she didn't respond, then, very quietly, "Thank you, Mr. Hale. You can move your things into the cook's room whenever you're ready, and—" He paused, unsure why he was about to say this. "The men talk. They'll make jokes. If it gets bad, you tell me." "I've heard worse. I'm sure you have. But you work for me now, and I don't tolerate cruelty on my property." This time she did turn around. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying, just looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Why?" she asked. "Why what?" "Why do you care? I'm just the cook." Rowan didn't have a good answer for that, so he just shrugged and walked away, leaving her alone in the kitchen that smelled like home. Outside, the storm was getting worse. But inside Ash Ridge Ranch, something had shifted. Something small. Something fragile. Something that might, if nobody broke it first, turn into something worth keeping. Spring came late to Wyoming territory that year, arriving in fits and starts like it couldn't quite commit to the idea of warmth. Snow melted into mud, then froze again overnight. The days grew longer but no less brutal, and the work at Ash Ridge Ranch continued the way it always had, hard, relentless, and without mercy. But something had shifted in the months since Mabel returned from burying her mother. The house felt different, warmer somehow, even when the temperature outside dropped below freezing. The kitchen had become the heart of the ranch in a way it never was before, and the men who'd once mocked Mabel now found excuses to linger there after meals, drinking coffee, and telling stories while she worked. She'd stopped trying to make herself invisible, stopped hunching her shoulders and keeping her eyes down. Her mother's letter, the one she kept folded in her apron pocket and read whenever doubt crept in, had planted something inside her that refused to die no matter how hard the world tried to kill it. "Take up space," her mother had written. "Be loud. Be big." So Mabel did. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But in small ways that accumulated over time until one day she looked around and realized she'd stopped apologizing for existing. Rowan noticed. He'd started spending more time in the house, finding reasons to be near the kitchen when Mabel was working. He'd repair hinges that didn't really need repairing, oil doors that weren't actually squeaking, stand by the window drinking coffee and pretending he wasn't watching her knead bread dough or roll out pie crust. The men noticed too. "Boss is sweet on the cook," Jake said one morning while they were mending fence line. He kept his voice low, but not low enough. Tom spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Don't be stupid. Rowan ain't interested in women, not since Anna died. Then why's he always hanging around the kitchen? Because the coffee's good and he's got nothing better to do. Sure, that's it. Jake hammered another nail into the post. You seen the way he looks at her? I seen the way you're about to lose your front teeth if you don't shut up. They worked in silence after that, but the words had been said. And once words like that got loose, they had a way of spreading. By the end of the week, every man on the ranch was watching Rowan and Mabel, looking for signs of something that maybe wasn't there yet but felt inevitable. Silas Boone watched too, and he didn't like what he saw. He'd been foreman at Ash Ridge for 8 years, and in that time he'd built a comfortable little empire for himself. Rowan trusted him to run the day-to-day operations, which meant Silas had more power than any foreman had a right to. He hired and fired workers without oversight, managed the books without scrutiny, made decisions that should have required Rowan's approval but never did because Rowan was too buried in grief to care. But lately Rowan had been paying attention again, asking questions, checking the ledgers, getting involved in decisions that Silas had been making on his own for years. And it all started when the fat cook arrived. Silas stood in the barn one evening, watching through the window as Rowan helped Mabel carry water from the pump. Watched the way they moved together, not touching, not even talking, but existing in the same space with an ease that made Silas's jaw tighten. Problem, boss? One of the younger hands, a kid named Danny, who'd only been at the ranch a few months, had noticed Silas staring. No problem, Silas said. Get back to work. But there was a problem, a big one. Because if Rowan fell for that woman, and it sure as hell looked like he was falling, then Silas's comfortable arrangement was going to fall apart. Rowan would start caring about the ranch again, start noticing the discrepancies in the books, start asking why they were spending so much on supplies that never seemed to arrive, or why 3 horses had gone missing last winter without any investigation. Silas had been skimming money from Ash Ridge for years, not enough to be obvious, but enough to build himself a nice nest egg. Enough to buy property of his own someday, maybe start his own operation. But that plan only worked if Rowan stayed distant and distracted, and Mabel Mercer was making him neither of those things. Something had to be done about her. Inside the house, completely unaware of Silas's calculations, Mabel was teaching Rowan how to make biscuits. It had started as a joke. Rowan had mentioned offhand that he couldn't cook anything more complicated than hardtack and jerky, and Mabel had laughed and said that was pathetic for a man his age. I'm 34, not ancient, he'd said, old enough to know how to feed yourself properly. That's what I pay you for. What if I'm not here someday? You gonna starve? I'll figure it out. Or, Mabel had said, pulling out a bowl and flour, you could learn right now and save yourself the trouble. So there they were, standing at the kitchen counter while Mabel showed him how to cut butter into flour until it looked like coarse sand. You're using too much pressure, she said, watching him work. It needs to be light, like you're barely touching it. I am barely touching it. No, you're mashing it. There's a difference. Rowan stopped and looked at her. You enjoy bossing me around? Little bit. He almost smiled at that. Nobody else on this ranch would dare. Maybe they should. You're not scary as you think you are. I'm plenty scary. To them, maybe. Mabel took the bowl from him and demonstrated the proper technique. But I've seen you rescue a terrified horse and stitch up my hand and help me carry water even though you've got 100 other things to do. So forgive me if I'm not trembling in my boots. Rowan watched her hands move, quick and confident, transforming the mixture into something that would eventually become food. He'd watched her work 100 times by now, but it never stopped being fascinating. The way she moved through the kitchen like she owned it, like every tool and ingredient answered to her and nobody else. Where'd you learn all this? He asked. I told you, my mother. Yeah, but there's learning to cook, and then there's cooking like you do. That's not just following recipes, that's something else. Mabel's hands stilled. She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was softer than usual. When I was little, my father used to say I was too much, too loud, too big, too hungry, too everything. He didn't mean it cruel, at least I don't think he did, but it stuck with me. Made me feel like I was always taking up more space than I deserved. That's bullshit, Rowan said flatly. Maybe. But when you hear something enough times, you start believing it. She went back to working the dough. After he died and it was just me and my mother, she taught me how to cook. Said it was important for a woman to have skills that made her valuable. But the more I cooked, the more I realized it wasn't about being valuable to other people. It was about creating something, about taking raw ingredients and turning them into something that made people happy, something that mattered. It does matter, Rowan said. What you do here, it matters. Mabel looked up at him, and for a moment their eyes met. The air between them felt heavy with something neither of them knew how to name. Then the kitchen door banged open and Jake stumbled in, breaking the moment. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, looking between them with poorly concealed curiosity. "But we got a situation with one of the cows. Looks like she's trying to calf, but something's wrong." Rowan was out the door in seconds, already moving toward the barn. Mabel stayed behind, staring at the half-finished biscuit dough and wondering what might have happened if Jake hadn't interrupted. Probably nothing, she told herself. Men like Rowan didn't fall for women like her. Silas had made that perfectly clear months ago, and nothing that had happened since changed that basic truth. But sometimes, in quiet moments when Rowan looked at her a certain way or helped her without being asked, she let herself imagine otherwise. The cow died during calving despite everything Rowan and the men tried. The calf survived, but it was weak and small, and nobody thought it would make it through the night. Rowan carried it to the barn and set it down in a bed of fresh hay, then stood there looking at the tiny creature struggling to breathe. "Want me to put it down?" Tom asked. "Ain't gonna survive anyway. More merciful to end it quick." "No." Rowan's voice was hard. "Give it a chance." "Boss, it can't even stand. Mother's dead, which means it's got no milk. Even if we could get it to drink from a bottle, odds are—" I said no. Tom backed off, exchanging glances with the other men. They all knew that tone, knew better than to push when Rowan used it. After they left, Rowan sat down in the hay next to the calf and put his hand on its side, feeling the rapid heartbeat under his palm. He'd lost count of how many animals he'd watched die over the years. It was part of ranch life, as natural as breathing. You learned not to get attached, learned to see livestock as resources, rather than living things with their own will to survive. But this calf, this fragile, gasping creature, reminded him too much of the son he'd lost 6 years ago. The baby who'd taken one breath and then stopped, taking Anna with him into whatever darkness waited beyond life. Rowan had held his son for maybe 30 seconds before the doctor took him away. 30 seconds of feeling that tiny body in his arms, warm and real and already gone. He hadn't cried then, hadn't cried at the funeral, hadn't cried once in 6 years because crying wouldn't bring them back and it wouldn't fix the hole they'd left behind. But sitting in that barn with a dying calf, he felt something crack inside his chest. "Mr. Hale?" He looked up to find Mabel standing in the barn doorway with a bottle in her hand. "Thought the calf might need this," she said. "It's milk from the other cows. Not ideal, but better than nothing." Rowan nodded, not trusting his voice. Mabel came closer and knelt down beside him. She looked at the calf for a long moment, then reached out and stroked its head. "Poor thing," she murmured. "Born into the world without a mother. That's a hard way to start. It's not going to make it." "Maybe not, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try." She offered him the bottle. "You want to do it, or should I?" Rowan took the bottle and carefully lifted the calf's head. It took 3 tries before the animal figured out how to drink, but once it started, it drank like it was starving, which it was. They sat there together in the quiet barn, taking turns feeding the calf while the sun set outside and shadows grew long across the hay. "You ever lose someone?" Rowan asked suddenly. Mabel didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was careful. "My father. Then my mother. Both of them gone before I turned 25. "That's not what I meant." She looked at him. "Then what did you mean?" "I mean someone who took part of you with them when they left. Someone who made you realize you'd never be whole again." Mabel was quiet for a long time. Finally she said, "No, I've never had that. Never had anyone love me enough that losing them would break me." The way she said it, so matter-of-fact, like she'd accepted it as an unchangeable truth, made Rowan's chest tighten. "That's not—" He stopped, struggling to find words. "You're worth loving. You know that, right?" Mabel laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "Am I? Because I've spent my whole life being told otherwise. Too fat, too plain, too much trouble. Every man who's ever looked at me has looked right through me, like I'm furniture or wallpaper or something equally forgettable." "I don't look through you." The words came out before he could stop them. Mabel stared at him. What? I don't look through you, Rowan repeated. I see you every day, and you're... He stopped again, uncertain how to finish that sentence. I'm what? Her voice was barely a whisper. You're the first person in 6 years who's made this place feel alive again. The calf chose that moment to let out a weak bleat, breaking the tension. Mabel stood up quickly, brushing hay from her skirt. I should get back to the house. Supper won't cook itself. Mabel, thank you for saying that, about seeing me. That was... Thank you. She was already moving toward the door, practically running. Rowan watched her go and cursed himself for being a fool. What had he been thinking? She was the cook. He was her employer. There were lines you didn't cross, rules you didn't break, and confessing that you saw someone, really saw them, was about as far over the line as you could get without actually touching them. But the truth was out now, sitting between them like a live thing. And Rowan had no idea what to do about it. Over the next few weeks, things at the ranch grew strange. Not bad exactly, just off balance. Like everyone was waiting for something to happen, but nobody knew what. The calf survived against all odds. Mabel bottle-fed it every few hours, and slowly it grew stronger. The men started calling it stubborn because it refused to die, and the name stuck. Rowan found himself making excuses to be near Mabel more often, helping with tasks she didn't need help with. Staying in the kitchen long after meals ended, talking to her about things he hadn't talked about in years, his childhood, his parents who died when he was young, the dreams he'd had before life taught him to stop dreaming. She talked too, telling him about growing up poor in Black Hollow, about her father who drank too much, and her mother who worked herself to exhaustion trying to keep them fed, about feeling invisible her whole life, like she was living in a world that had no place for her. But you found a place here, Rowan said one evening. They were sitting on the porch after supper, watching the sun set over the mountains. It had become their routine, these quiet conversations while the ranch settled into night. Did I? Mabel asked. Or did I just find another kitchen to hide in? You're not hiding, aren't I? I cook, I clean, I stay out of everyone's way. That's not so different from how I lived in Black Hollow. It's completely different. In Black Hollow, you were surviving. Here, you're... Rowan stopped, searching for the right word. I'm what? Blooming, Mabel laughed. Blooming? I'm a 200-pound woman covered in flour and sweat. That's not blooming. Says who? Says everyone who's ever looked at me. Then everyone's an idiot. Rowan turned to face her fully. You walked onto this ranch and changed everything. The men are happier. The house feels alive. Even I'm... He stopped himself before saying too much. Even you're what? Different, he finished quietly. I'm different because of you. The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Mabel could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. Rowan! I know I shouldn't say these things. I know there's supposed to be boundaries between an employer and his cook, but I can't... He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I can't stop thinking about you, can't stop noticing everything you do, can't stop wanting... He didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. Mabel stood up abruptly. I should go inside. Mabel, wait. No. She was shaking now, torn between hope and terror. Don't say things you don't mean. Don't make me believe in something that isn't real. It is real. How can it be? Look at me, Rowan. Really look. I'm not the kind of woman men fall for. I'm the kind they settle for when they can't find anyone better. That's the biggest load of horseshit I've ever heard. Is it? Then tell me this. If I looked different, would you have noticed me sooner? If I was small and pretty and everything I'm not, would we have had this conversation weeks ago instead of now? Rowan opened his mouth, then closed it. Because the truth was complicated. Would he have noticed her sooner if she looked different? Maybe. Probably. But would he have fallen for her the way he was falling now? Would he have seen the strength in her, the quiet determination, the way she transformed everything she touched? He didn't know. And his hesitation told Mabel everything she needed to know. That's what I thought, she said quietly. Then she went inside and closed the door behind her. Rowan sat alone on the porch and hated himself. Inside the house, Mabel leaned against the door and tried not to cry. She'd been right. Of course she'd been right. Men like Rowan didn't fall for women like her, and the fact that she'd let herself hope, even for a moment, was her own stupid fault. She went to her small room and pulled out her mother's letter, reading it for the 100th time. Don't spend your life making yourself smaller just because other people are uncomfortable with how much space you take up. But what if taking up space meant getting hurt? What if being big and loud and everything her mother wanted her to be just meant giving the world more of her to reject? She folded the letter carefully and put it back in her pocket. Then she washed her face, fixed her hair, and went back to the kitchen to prepare tomorrow's breakfast. Because that's what you did when you were Mabel Mercer. You kept moving forward even when everything in you wanted to stop. The tension between Mabel and Rowan might have continued indefinitely, if not for what happened 3 days later. It started with Silas. He'd been watching them for weeks, seeing the way they circled each other like two people trying not to fall, and he decided that enough was enough. If Rowan wouldn't see reason, then Silas would make him see it. He started small, subtle things that could be explained away as accidents or coincidence. Food went missing from the pantry. Nothing obvious, just enough that Mabel had to work harder to stretch supplies. Kitchen tools broke at inconvenient times. A pot handle came loose. A knife blade cracked. The oven door started sticking shut. Mabel noticed but said nothing. She just worked around the problems, the way she'd worked around problems her entire life. Then Silas escalated. He started turning the other men against her. "You notice how much food she eats?" he said one morning while they were saddling horses. "Half the supplies going missing are probably going straight into her mouth." "Come on, Silas," Jake said. "That ain't fair." "Ain't it? Look at her. Woman that size doesn't stay that size without eating more than her share." Tom laughed. "He's got a point." "And the boss," Silas continued, his voice casual but poisonous. "Poor bastard's so lonely he's convinced himself he's in love with her. But we all know what's really happening. She's manipulating him, playing on his grief, making herself indispensable so he can't get rid of her." "You really think that's what she's doing?" Danny asked. He was young, impressionable, and exactly the kind of person Silas's words would stick to. "I know that's what she's doing. Women like her, they know they can't get a man through normal means. So they find broken ones and worm their way in. Before you know it, she'll be running this whole ranch, and we'll all be answering to her." The poison spread. By the end of the week, half the men were looking at Mabel with suspicion instead of friendliness. They stopped lingering in the kitchen after meals, stopped saying thank you for the food, started making jokes behind her back that got meaner and more pointed. "The barn cow's at it again," someone muttered when Mabel walked past carrying firewood. Laughter followed her into the house. She set down the wood and stood there trembling, feeling 6 years old again. Feeling like the little girl her father said was too much, too big, too everything wrong. That night, someone carved words into the barn wall where Mabel would see them on her morning walk to collect eggs. "Fat cow, go home." She stared at the words for a long time, feeling something inside her start to crack. This was it. This was the moment she'd been waiting for since arriving at Ash Ridge. The moment when everyone stopped pretending she was welcome and showed their true feelings. She should leave, pack her things and ride back to Black Hollow before the humiliation got worse. But then she thought about her mother's letter, about taking up space, about refusing to make herself smaller just because the world wanted her to. And she thought about Rowan, about the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, about the way he'd said, "I see you," like those words meant something. Maybe he hadn't answered her question fast enough. Maybe he'd hesitated when she asked if he would have noticed her sooner if she looked different. But he had said she'd changed him, and that had to mean something. She went back to the house and made breakfast like she always did. When the men came in to eat, she served them without comment, without acknowledging the cruel words or the hostile looks, or the way they whispered to each other when they thought she couldn't hear. She just did her job. And when Rowan came in last, taking his usual seat at the head of the table, she poured his coffee and met his eyes directly. "Morning," she said. "Morning." He frowned, studying her face. "You all right?" "Fine." "You sure? You look—" "I'm fine," she repeated, more firmly this time. He didn't believe her, but he let it go. After breakfast, after the men had gone back to work, Rowan found the words carved into the barn wall. He stood there staring at them, feeling rage build in his chest like a living thing. Someone on his ranch had done this. Someone he paid, someone he trusted, had carved cruelty into wood and left it for Mabel to find. He didn't need to guess who. Silas was in the corral working with one of the horses when Rowan found him. "We need to talk," Rowan said. "About what?" "About the words on the barn wall." Silas didn't even have the decency to look surprised. "Don't know what you're talking about." "The hell you don't. You've been poisoning the men against Mabel, turning them against her. And now someone's carved insults where she'll see them." "Can't control what the men think or say," Silas said with a shrug. "If they don't like her, that's their business. It's my business when it happens on my property." "Your property?" Silas's eyes narrowed. "Since when do you care about anything that happens on this property? You've been walking around like a ghost for 6 years, letting me run everything while you mope. Now suddenly you're paying attention? That's convenient. Watch your tone. Or what? You'll fire me? Good luck running this place without me. You don't know half of what goes on here. Don't know which suppliers we use, which hands are reliable, where the money goes." "Then maybe you should tell me," Rowan said quietly, "starting with why the supply costs have doubled in the last year." Silas froze. "Yeah," Rowan continued. "I've been looking at the books, been noticing some interesting discrepancies. Money going out for supplies that never seem to arrive. Cattle sales that don't match the count. You want to explain that?" "You accusing me of something?" "I'm saying things don't add up, and I'm saying that stops now, all of it. The stealing, the cruelty, the poison you've been spreading. It stops, or you're gone." Silas laughed, a cold, ugly sound. "You think you can get rid of me? I know where all the bodies are buried on this ranch. Literally. I know things that would destroy you if they got out. Try me." They stared at each other for a long moment, two men who'd worked together for years suddenly realizing they'd never actually been on the same side. Finally, Silas spat in the dirt. "This is about her, isn't it? The fat cook? You're throwing away 8 years because you can't keep your dick in your pants." Rowan hit him, one solid punch that sent Silas sprawling in the mud. "Her name," Rowan said quietly, standing over him, "is Mabel. And you'll use it with respect, or you'll find somewhere else to work. You got until sundown to make your choice." Then he walked away, leaving Silas bleeding in the dirt. Inside the house, Mabel had watched the whole thing through the kitchen window. When Rowan came back inside, she was waiting. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yeah, I did. He's your foreman. You need him to run this place." "I don't need anyone who treats you like that." Rowan moved to the wash basin and started cleaning his split knuckles. "I should have done it weeks ago. Should have shut him down the first time he said something cruel. But I didn't, and I'm sorry for that." Mabel came closer, taking his hand and examining the damage. "You're going to need these wrapped." "I've had worse." "I know, but I'm still wrapping them." She pulled out clean cloth and started bandaging his knuckles with gentle efficiency. "Why'd you do it? Really?" "Because he was wrong. About you. About everything." "Was he?" She finished wrapping one hand and started on the other. "Maybe I am manipulating you. Maybe I am using your grief to... Stop!" Rowan caught her hand, making her look at him. "You're not manipulating anyone. You're just being yourself, and that's enough. More than enough." "You don't have to say that." "I'm not saying it because I have to. I'm saying it because it's true." He squeezed her hand gently. "You asked me the other night if I would have noticed you sooner if you looked different, and I hesitated because I was trying to be honest. The truth is, I don't know. Maybe I would have. But the woman I would have noticed, she wouldn't have been you. She wouldn't have had your strength or your kindness or your stubborn refusal to quit, even when everything's telling you to." Mabel's eyes were wet. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." "Then people have been saying the wrong things your whole life." She laughed, a watery, broken sound, and suddenly they were standing so close that Mabel could feel the heat coming off his body. "Rowan, I'm falling in love with you," he said. "And I know I probably shouldn't say that. No, it makes everything complicated. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel it. Can't keep lying to myself about what you mean to me." Mabel stared at him, certain she'd heard wrong. "You're... what?" "Falling in love with you. Have been for months, probably. Just took me this long to admit it. But I'm..." She gestured helplessly at herself. "I'm me. And you're you. That doesn't make sense. Makes perfect sense to me. No, it doesn't. You're supposed to want someone beautiful and thin, and I want you, Rowan said firmly, exactly as you are. And if you can't believe that, then I'll just have to keep saying it until you do. Before Mabel could respond, before she could talk herself out of what she wanted, Rowan leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle, careful, like he was afraid she might break. And for the first time in her life, Mabel felt like someone was holding her like she was precious instead of breakable. When they finally pulled apart, she was crying. Hey, Rowan said, wiping her tears with his thumb. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. She laughed through the tears. I just never thought, I never let myself believe that someone could. I do, he said simply, and I will, for as long as you'll let me. Mabel pulled him down and kissed him again, harder this time, pouring 6 years of loneliness and longing into it. Outside, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. But inside the kitchen of Ash Ridge Ranch, 2 broken people had finally found something whole. The kiss changed everything and nothing at the same time. Mabel still woke before dawn to cook breakfast. Rowan still ran the ranch with the same iron discipline he always had. The men still worked from sunup to sundown, mending fences and tending cattle and doing all the things that kept Ash Ridge functioning. But underneath the ordinary rhythms of ranch life, something fundamental had shifted. Rowan touched her now. Small gestures that nobody else would notice. His hand on the small of her back when he passed her in the kitchen, his fingers brushing hers when she handed him his coffee. The way he'd stand just a little too close when they talked, like he couldn't help himself. Mabel caught herself smiling for no reason, humming while she worked, looking up every time she heard boots on the porch, hoping it was him. They didn't talk about what they were to each other, didn't put labels on it or make announcements. It was too new, too fragile, too precious to expose to the harsh light of other people's opinions. But Jake noticed anyway. You and the boss, he said one morning while Mabel was kneading bread dough. He'd come in early to grab coffee before heading out to check the fence line. That's happening now, huh? Mabel's hand stilled. I don't know what you mean. Sure you don't. Jake poured himself a cup and leaned against the counter. Look, I ain't judging. You're both adults, and honestly, it's nice seeing him smile again. Been a long time since anyone made him do that. Jake, I'm just saying, be careful. There's people on this ranch who won't like it, who'll make trouble if they get the chance. You mean Silas? I mean Silas and anyone he's got in his pocket. Jake set down his cup. He's been real quiet since Rowan hit him. Too quiet. That man doesn't let things go, and he sure as hell doesn't forgive. You watch yourself around him. After Jake left, Mabel stood alone in the kitchen, feeling cold despite the heat from the stove. She'd been so caught up in what was happening between her and Rowan that she'd stopped paying attention to everything else, stopped noticing the way Silas watched her with calculating eyes, stopped hearing the whispers that followed her through the ranch. That was stupid, dangerous even, because Jake was right. Silas didn't forgive, and he definitely didn't forget. She found Rowan in his office later that morning, bent over the account books with a scowl on his face. Something wrong? She asked from the doorway. He looked up, and his expression softened immediately. Just trying to make sense of these numbers. Silas kept terrible records. Is he still here? I haven't seen him since... She gestured vaguely, not sure how to finish that sentence. Since you punched him seemed too blunt. He's staying in the bunkhouse, keeping to himself mostly. Rowan set down his pen and rubbed his eyes. I should have fired him outright. Would've, if I could figure out how to run this place without him. Man's been here 8 years, knows every detail of how things work. You'll figure it out. Will I? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I spent 6 years not paying attention. Let Silas handle everything while I wallowed in grief. Now I'm looking at these books and realizing I don't know half of what's been going on. Money's missing. Supplies don't match up. And I can't prove anything because Silas was smart about it. Mabel came closer, peering at the ledger over his shoulder. Numbers marched across the page in neat columns. Supplies purchased, cattle sold, wages paid. It all looked legitimate at first glance. But when she looked closer, she started seeing the discrepancies. Small amounts here and there that didn't quite add up. Expenses that seemed too high. Sales that seemed too low. He's been stealing from you, she said quietly. Yeah, for years probably, and I was too buried in my own misery to notice. Rowan slammed the book shut. That's what kills me. Not the money. I can recover from that, but knowing I let this happen, that I trusted him when I should have been paying attention. You were grieving. That's not an excuse. Maybe not, but it's a reason. Mabel put her hand on his shoulder. You're paying attention now. That's what matters. Rowan covered her hand with his, turning his head to press a kiss to her palm. What would I do without you? Starve, probably. He laughed, a real laugh this time, and pulled her down onto his lap. Probably true. They sat like that for a moment. Mabel's considerable weight settled against him, his arms around her waist. It should have felt awkward, should have made her self-conscious about her size, about taking up too much space. But Rowan held her like she weighed nothing, like having her there was exactly where he wanted her. We should be careful, she said finally. Jake warned me this morning, said Silas won't let things go. Jake's a smart man. So we're in danger? Maybe, probably. Rowan's arms tightened around her. But I'm not letting you go because Silas Boone is too much of a coward to accept defeat. If he wants a fight, he'll get one. But it won't change what's between us. Mabel twisted to look at him. You're sure about that? About us? More sure than I've been about anything in years. Even though I'm... Don't, he said firmly. Don't you dare finish that sentence. I know what you look like, know exactly who I'm holding, and I'm telling you right now, there's nowhere else I'd rather be. Mabel kissed him then, pouring all her gratitude and disbelief and desperate hope into it. When they finally broke apart, she was breathing hard and her face was flushed. I should get back to work, she said. Lunch won't cook itself. Stay a little longer. Can't. The men will notice. Let them notice. Rowan, I know, we're being careful. He released her reluctantly. But tonight, after everyone's asleep, come find me. I want to talk without worrying about who's listening. Mabel nodded and stood up, smoothing her skirt. As she headed for the door, Rowan called after her. Mabel? She turned. I meant what I said, about being sure, about us. She smiled, a real smile that lit up her whole face. I know. Then she left, and Rowan sat alone in his office feeling lighter than he had in years. He should have known it wouldn't last. The trouble started 3 days later, right as spring finally seemed to be winning its battle against winter. A stranger rode into Ash Ridge just after dawn, a well-dressed man on an expensive horse, carrying himself with the kind of confidence that came from having money and knowing it. Rowan was in the barn when Jake came running to find him. Boss, we got a visitor. Says his name is Victor Crow, and he needs to talk to you about business. Rowan felt his jaw tighten. He knew that name. Everyone in the territory knew that name. Victor Crow was a land baron who'd made his fortune buying up struggling ranches and consolidating them into a cattle empire that stretched across 3 states. He was ruthless, brilliant, and completely without mercy when it came to getting what he wanted. And if he was at Ash Ridge, it meant he wanted something. Rowan found him standing in the yard, studying the main house with an appraising eye. Up close, Victor was younger than Rowan expected, maybe 40, with dark hair going silver at the temples and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Hale, Victor said, extending his hand. Thank you for seeing me. Rowan didn't take the offered hand. What do you want? Victor smiled, unbothered by the rudeness. Direct. I appreciate that. Most men waste time with pleasantries when we both know why I'm here. I don't know why you're here, so enlighten me. I want to buy Ash Ridge. Rowan stared at him. It's not for sale. Everything's for sale if the price is right. I'm prepared to offer you triple what this property's worth. Cash payment, immediate transfer. You could be out of here by the end of the month, free to start fresh somewhere else. And I'm telling you, it's not for sale. This land has been in my family for 3 generations. I'm not selling it to some vulture who'll strip it for parts. Victor's smile faded. That's unfortunate, because I've already purchased the 2 ranches bordering your property. The Sullivan place to the west and the Morrison spread to the east. You're now surrounded by my land, Mr. Hale. That's going to make things difficult for you. Is that a threat? It's reality. Access to water, to grazing land, to the main road, all of that runs through my property now. I control your supply lines, your markets, everything that makes this ranch viable. Victor pulled out a cigar and lit it slowly. You can fight me if you want. Spend years in court arguing over right-of-way and water rights. Spend every dollar you have on lawyers while your cattle starve. Or you can take my generous offer and walk away with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. What di oskeoko? Get off my property. I'll give you a week to think about it. After that, my offer drops by half. Every week you delay, it drops again. Eventually, I'll own this place anyway, either because you sell or because you can't afford to keep it running, but you'll get a lot less money if you make me wait. Victor tipped his hat and turned to leave. He'd almost reached his horse when he paused and looked back. One more thing. I heard you've got a new cook. Martha's daughter, isn't it? Mabel something? Every muscle in Rowan's body went tense. What about her? Just making conversation? Small territory? Word travels? People say she's quite talented in the kitchen. Victor swung up into his saddle. Be a shame if something happened to her. Accidents happen on ranches all the time. Fires, injuries, that sort of thing. You'd hate to lose another woman, wouldn't you? He rode off before Rowan could respond, leaving nothing but cigar smoke and the implicit threat hanging in the air. Rowan stood frozen in the yard, rage and fear warring in his chest. He wanted to chase after Victor and drag him off that horse, wanted to make him take back those words, that threat against Mabel. But violence wouldn't solve this. Victor Crow didn't make threats unless he had the power to follow through. And if he was willing to threaten Mabel directly, it meant he knew about her relationship with Rowan, which meant someone had been talking. Rowan found Silas in the bunkhouse an hour later. The foreman was sitting on his cot, cleaning his rifle with methodical precision. He looked up when Rowan entered, but didn't stop working. You got something to say? Silas asked. Victor Crow was just here. I heard. Man wants to buy the ranch, from what Danny said. He also knew about Mabel, knew her name, knew she was working here. Rowan moved closer, watching Silas's face for any tell. Now how would he know that unless someone told him? Silas set down the rifle and met Rowan's gaze without flinching. Could have been anyone. Like the man said, word travels. Did you tell him? Why would I do that? Because you're angry. Because I hit you and called you out for stealing. Because you want to hurt me any way you can. Rowan's voice was dangerously quiet. So I'm asking you one more time. Did you tell Victor Crow about Mabel? And if I did? Silas stood up, matching Rowan's aggressive posture. What are you going to do about it? Fire me? You can't run this place without me, and we both know it. Hit me again? Go ahead. Won't change the fact that you're in over your head with a woman who's using you in a ranch that's falling apart. Rowan grabbed him by the shirt and slammed him against the wall. You threaten her again. You talk to Victor Crow again. You do anything that puts her in danger, and I'll kill you. That clear enough? Silas laughed in his face. You don't have it in you. You're too soft now. That woman's made you weak. Rowan released him and stepped back, breathing hard. Because Silas was right about one thing. He'd gotten soft. 6 years of grief had hollowed him out, and Mabel had filled those hollow spaces with something that felt like hope. But soft didn't mean defenseless. You're fired, Rowan said. Pack your things and be gone by nightfall. If I see you on my property after dark, I'll shoot you for trespassing. Silas's smile disappeared. You're making a mistake, maybe. But it's my mistake to make. Now get out. After Silas left, Rowan stood alone in the bunkhouse and wondered how everything had gone so wrong so fast. A week ago, he'd been falling in love. His ranch was running smoothly. Life felt almost manageable. Now he had Victor Crow threatening to strangle his business, Silas spreading poison, and Mabel caught in the middle of it all. He needed a plan, needed to figure out how to fight off Victor's takeover attempt while keeping Mabel safe. But when he walked back to the main house and found her in the kitchen making lunch, humming quietly to herself while she worked, all his plans evaporated. She looked up when he entered and smiled. There you are. I was starting to worry. Her smile faded when she saw his expression. What happened? We need to talk. He told her everything, about Victor Crow's offer, his threats, the way he'd mentioned her name like a weapon, about firing Silas and the certainty that things were about to get much worse before they got better. Mabel listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each word. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I should leave. What? No. If I'm the problem, if having me here is putting you in danger, You're not the problem. Victor Crow is the problem. Silas is the problem. You're the only good thing that's happened to me in 6 years, and I'll be damned if I let them drive you away. But Rowan, No. He took her hands, holding them tight. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But running won't solve this. It'll just prove to men like Victor that threats work, that they can take whatever they want by scaring people into submission. So what do? We fight. We make this ranch so valuable, so essential, that Victor can't afford to destroy it. And we make sure everyone knows that threatening you means going through me first. Mabel pulled one hand free and touched his face gently. You can't fight the whole world for me. Watch me. She kissed him then, soft and sad and desperate all at once. When they pulled apart, her eyes were wet. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything, she whispered. You won't be. You're the reason I remember what I'm fighting for. They held each other in the quiet kitchen while outside, storm clouds continued to gather on the horizon. The attack started small. A fence cut in the middle of the night, letting a dozen cattle wander onto Victor Crow's property. By the time Rowan's men found them, Victor's ranch hands had already branded them as their own. Sorry, Victor said when Rowan confronted him. My men assumed they were strays. Easy mistake to make. 2 days later, the water pump broke. When they went to fix it, they found the gears deliberately damaged, filed down until they wouldn't catch properly. Then one of the supply wagons heading to Ash Ridge was attacked on the road. Nobody was hurt, but the supplies were stolen and the driver was too scared to make another run. This is only going to get worse, Tom said one evening. The remaining ranch hands had gathered in the barn to discuss what they should do. Victor's trying to starve us out, make it so expensive to run this place that Rowan has to sell. So what do? Danny asked. Just give up? We don't give up, Jake said firmly. We dig in. Make it so hard for Victor that he gives up first. You willing to risk your life for that? Tom shot back. Because that's what we're talking about here. Victor Crow doesn't play fair. Men who cross him have a way of disappearing. Then maybe we should all leave, Danny said quietly. Find work somewhere safer. Nobody argued with him, because he was right. Staying at Ash Ridge meant putting yourself in the crosshairs of a very dangerous man. One by one, the ranch hands started leaving. Danny left first, taking his gear and riding out without saying goodbye. Then 2 more men followed. Then Tom, who'd been at Ash Ridge longer than anyone except Silas. Nothing personal, boss, Tom said as he packed his saddlebags. But I got a family to think about. Can't afford to get killed over a piece of land that ain't even mine. By the end of the week, only Jake and 2 others remained. Rowan stood in the yard watching his workforce disappear and felt the weight of it crushing down on him. He'd built Ash Ridge back from nothing after Anna died, had poured everything he had into keeping it running, and now it was falling apart again. Mabel found him that night sitting on the porch, staring out at the dark ranch. Penny for your thoughts? She said, settling down beside him. I don't have any thoughts worth a penny right now. That bad, huh? Worse. He gestured at the empty bunkhouse. Half my men are gone. The ones who stayed are probably just waiting for a good excuse to leave. And Victor's out there somewhere planning his next move. So we're losing. Yeah, we're losing. Mabel was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. You know what my mother used to say? She said the difference between rich people and poor people wasn't money. It was knowing what people really need. I don't follow. Rich people think everyone needs what they have, money, power, control. But most people just need to feel safe, to feel like they matter, like someone sees them. She looked at him. Victor's offering your ranch hands money to leave. But what if we offered them something better? Like what? Community? Family? A reason to stay that's bigger than just a paycheck. Rowan frowned. I'm still not following. Mabel stood up, her eyes bright with an idea that was still forming. Come with me. I want to show you something. She led him to the kitchen and started pulling out supplies. Flour, sugar, dried fruit, everything she'd been hoarding for emergencies. What are you doing? Rowan asked. Making food. Lots of food. She tied on her apron and started working. Tomorrow morning, I want you to send Jake into town. Tell him to spread the word that Ash Ridge is offering free meals to anyone who needs them. Farmers, widows, travelers, anyone who's hungry. Mabel, we can't afford not to. Victor's trying to isolate us, make us look weak and desperate. So we do the opposite. We open our doors. We become the place people come to, not the place they run from. That's insane. Maybe. But you got a better idea? Rowan stared at her. This woman who'd walked into his dead ranch and brought it back to life through nothing but stubborn determination and the ability to make cold places warm. "You really think this'll work?" he asked. "I think it's worth trying. And if it doesn't work, at least we'll have fed some hungry people before Victor runs us out of business." She had a point. The next morning, Jake rode into Black Hollow with Mabel's message. By noon, word had spread through the territory. Ash Ridge Ranch was offering free meals, no questions asked. The first visitors arrived that afternoon. A widow with 3 children, all of them painfully thin. A farmer who'd lost his crop to early frost. An old man who'd been living rough after his son kicked him out. Mabel fed them all. She cooked from dawn until dark, producing meals that would have cost a week's wages in any restaurant. Beef stew thick with vegetables. Fresh bread. Apple pie. Coffee that actually tasted like something worth drinking. Word spread faster than wildfire. Within 3 days, Ash Ridge had become the most popular place in the territory. People traveled from miles away just to eat at Mabel's table. They brought friends, family, anyone who needed a good meal and a warm welcome. And they talked about the woman who cooked like an angel, about the rancher who opened his doors when everyone else was closing theirs, about how Ash Ridge felt more like home than anywhere they'd been in years. Victor Crow heard about it, of course, heard that his plan to isolate Ash Ridge had backfired spectacularly. He showed up on the 5th day, riding through the crowd of people gathered in Rowan's yard. "Quite an operation you've got here," Victor said, dismounting. "Feeding half the territory out of your own pocket. That's either very generous or very stupid." "Maybe both," Rowan said. He was standing on the porch, arms crossed, watching Victor with wary eyes. "You know this won't stop me. I'll still get this ranch eventually. All you're doing is delaying the inevitable." "Then I'll delay it as long as I can." Victor studied him for a moment, then shook his head. "You really do love her, don't you? The cook. You're willing to lose everything just to keep her safe." "I'm willing to lose everything to do what's right." "Right and wrong don't mean much in business, Mr. Hale. Eventually you'll learn that." Victor swung back into his saddle. "Enjoy your little charity operation while it lasts. Winter's coming again. Let's see how generous you feel when your supplies run out and your bank account's empty." He rode off, leaving Rowan standing on the porch feeling like he'd just been given a death sentence. Because Victor was right. They couldn't sustain this forever. Eventually the money would run out, the supplies would dwindle, and they'd be right back where they started. But when Rowan walked into the kitchen and saw Mabel surrounded by grateful people thanking her for the meal, saw the way she smiled at them like they were family, he couldn't bring himself to regret the decision, even if it cost him everything. That night, after everyone had left and the kitchen was finally quiet, Mabel found Rowan in his office staring at the account books. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad. At the rate we're spending, we've got maybe 2 months before we're completely broke. Then we've got 2 months to figure something out." "Mabel, no." She came around the desk and took his face in her hands. "I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But we're not giving up. Not yet. What if we can't win? Then at least we'll lose knowing we tried, knowing we didn't roll over and let Victor take what's ours without a fight." Rowan pulled her close, burying his face in her neck. She smelled like cinnamon and flour and wood smoke, all the smells of home. "I love you," he said quietly. It was the first time he'd said the words out loud. Mabel went very still. Then her arms tightened around him. "I love you too," she whispered. "Even though I probably shouldn't. Even though loving you means fighting battles I never asked for. I love you anyway." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet office while outside the ranch slept. Neither of them saw the figure watching from the shadows. Neither of them saw Silas Boone standing by the barn, staring at the lit window with hatred burning in his eyes. Neither of them knew that the worst was yet to come. The fire started just after midnight on a Tuesday in late spring. Mabel woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of horses screaming. For a confused moment she thought she was dreaming, still caught in the nightmare that had been chasing her since Victor Crow first rode onto Ash Ridge property. Then she heard someone shouting outside and knew it was real. She scrambled out of bed, not bothering with shoes or a coat, and ran through the house. The kitchen was full of smoke, thick and black, pouring in through the window that faced the barn. The barn was on fire. Flames climbed the walls like living things, hungry and fast, turning the old wooden structure into a torch that lit up the night sky. Mabel could see figures running in the yard, Jake and the other hands trying to get the horses out, their faces orange in the firelight. She ran outside without thinking, her bare feet slipping in the mud. "Mabel, no!" Rowan's voice, hoarse from smoke. He was coming from the direction of the bunkhouse, shirt unbuttoned, hair wild. "Get back inside." But she couldn't, because through the open barn door she could see Stubborn, the calf she'd bottle-fed, the one who'd refused to die, trapped in his stall with fire crawling across the ceiling above him. She ran toward the barn. Rowan caught her halfway there, grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. "What the hell are you doing?" "Stubborn's still in there. The barn's gone, Mabel. We can't. I'm not leaving him." She tried to pull free, but Rowan held on. "You go in there, you die. I'm not letting you die for a goddamn calf." "Then come with me." She turned to face him, her eyes wild. "Please, Rowan, I can't just stand here and listen to him scream." For a moment she thought he'd refuse, thought he'd drag her back to the house and hold her there while the barn burned and Stubborn died. And she had to live with the knowledge that she could have saved him. Then Rowan cursed, long and vicious, and ran toward the burning barn with Mabel right behind him. The heat hit them like a physical thing, pushing them back. Smoke made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Somewhere above them, beams were cracking, getting ready to fall. "Where is he?" Rowan shouted over the roar of the fire. "Backstall, left side." They moved deeper into the inferno, staying low where the air was clearer. Mabel could barely breathe. Her lungs burned with every inhale. Her eyes streamed tears that evaporated before they could fall. Then she saw Stubborn. The calf was down in the straw, eyes rolling white with terror. The stall door had jammed shut, deliberately, Mabel realized with cold clarity. Someone had locked it from the outside. This wasn't an accident, this was murder. Rowan kicked the door once, twice. On the third kick, it splintered open. He grabbed Stubborn by the scruff and hauled him up, grunting with effort. "Go!" he shouted at Mabel. "Get out now!" She turned to run and saw it happen in slow motion. A beam overhead, thick as a man's torso, burning end to end, cracked free from its supports. It fell directly between Mabel and the barn door, cutting off their escape route. Sparks exploded upward. The heat intensified until Mabel thought her skin would catch fire just from proximity. They were trapped. "The back!" Rowan was already moving, carrying Stubborn toward the rear of the barn where there used to be a loading door. "Come on!" Mabel ran after him, her lungs screaming for air that wasn't full of smoke. The back door was smaller than the front, meant for equipment rather than animals, but it was open and it led outside, and that's all that mattered. Rowan shoved Stubborn through first. The calf stumbled into the night, bawling with terror. "You next," Rowan said, turning to Mabel. "No, you... Don't fucking argue with me." He grabbed her by the waist and physically threw her through the door. She landed hard in the mud outside, all the air knocked from her lungs. Then Rowan was there beside her, and they were both crawling away from the barn as fast as they could move. Behind them, the entire structure groaned once, a sound like the world ending, and collapsed inward on itself. They made it maybe 20 feet before they both collapsed, gasping for air that didn't taste like death. Mabel rolled onto her side and vomited smoke and bile into the grass. Her whole body was shaking. Her nightgown was burned in places. Her feet were cut and bleeding, and she was pretty sure she'd never felt worse in her entire life. But she was alive. They were both alive. Rowan crawled over to her, pulling her against his chest. He was shaking too, his whole body racked with tremors that had nothing to do with the cold. "Don't ever," he said into her hair, his voice breaking. "Don't ever do something that stupid again." "You came with me," Mabel managed to say between coughs, "because I'm an idiot who can't watch you die. We saved him. We almost died for a cow." "Doesn't matter, we saved him." Rowan made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and held her tighter. Around them, the ranch was chaos. Jake and the others had managed to get all the horses out before the barn collapsed, but the building itself was a total loss. Years of stored hay, equipment, supplies, all of it gone. And in the crowd of people who'd gathered to watch the fire burn, Mabel saw a face she recognized. Silas Boone, standing at the edge of the property line, watching the destruction with something that looked like satisfaction. Their eyes met across the distance. Silas smiled once, cold and cruel, then turned and disappeared into the darkness. By morning, the barn was nothing but charred timber and ash. Rowan stood in what used to be the main aisle, surveying the damage. Everything was gone. The tack room where they kept saddles and bridles. The tool shed where they stored equipment. The hayloft that had held enough feed to last through winter. "How much?" Jake asked quietly. "Too much." Rowan kicked at a piece of charred wood. "We can't replace this, not with what we've got left." "You thinking it was Silas?" "I know it was Silas. Saw him watching last night. And that stall door didn't jam itself." Rowan turned to face Jake. "He's escalating. First it was just sabotage. Now it's arson. What's next?" "You could go to the sheriff and say what? I saw my former foreman watching the fire? That's not proof. And even if it was, the sheriff's in Victor Crow's pocket. Everyone knows it." Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Maybe it's time to cut your losses, boss. Sell to Victor while you still can. Get out before someone gets killed." "I'm not selling." "Even if it means Mabel gets hurt?" Rowan's hands curled into fists. Because that was the question, wasn't it? How much was he willing to risk for a piece of land? How much was pride worth when measured against Mabel's life? "I need to think," he said finally. "Just give me some time to figure this out." He found Mabel in the kitchen an hour later. She was covered in soot, her nightgown ruined, her feet bandaged where she'd cut them running through the yard. But she was cooking breakfast like nothing had happened, moving through her routine with mechanical precision. "You should be resting," Rowan said from the doorway. "Can't. People will be here soon expecting food." "To hell with the food. You almost died last night." "But I didn't." She flipped a pancake without looking at him. "And those people out there are counting on us. I'm not letting them down just because I'm tired." Rowan came closer, taking the spatula from her hand and setting it aside. "Mabel, look at me." She did, and he could see the fear in her eyes, the shock that hadn't quite worn off yet. "We can't keep doing this," he said gently. "Can't keep fighting a war we're not equipped to win. Victor's got more money, more men, more everything. And now Silas is actively trying to hurt us. Maybe Jake's right. Maybe it's time to sell." "No." The word came out sharp, definite. "Mabel, I said no, we're not selling." "Why not? It's just land. We can find another place, start over somewhere Victor can't reach us." "It's not just land to you, and you know it." Mabel's voice was shaking now. "This is your home. This is where you buried Anna, where you've spent the last 6 years trying to figure out how to keep living. I'm not letting Victor Crow take that from you. I'm not letting him win. He's already winning. Then we change the game." She pulled away from him, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. "Victor thinks he can scare us into submission. Thinks if he burns our barn and threatens our lives, we'll just roll over. But what if we don't? What if we fight back in a way he's not expecting?" "What are you talking about?" Mabel stopped pacing and turned to face him. Her eyes were bright with an idea that was still forming, still dangerous, still probably insane. "You said Victor bought the ranches on either side of us, right? Which means he controls our access to water and grazing land." "Yeah, so?" "So what if we don't need his access? What if we create our own?" Rowan frowned. "I'm not following." "The people who come here to eat, they come from all over the territory. Farmers, ranchers, townspeople. What if we ask them for help? Not charity, but trade. They give us access to their resources. We keep feeding them. We bypass Victor entirely." "That's..." Rowan stopped, thinking. "That might actually work, if we could get enough people on board." "We can. People around here hate Victor. They're just too scared to fight him alone. But together?" She smiled, and it was fierce. "Together we're stronger than he is." "It's risky." "Everything's risky. At least this way we're doing something instead of just waiting to lose." Rowan studied her. This woman who'd walked into his dead ranch and refused to let it stay dead. Who'd nearly died saving a calf last night and was now planning to take on the most powerful man in the territory. "You're insane," he said. "Probably. And I love you for it." She crossed the space between them and kissed him hard. "Then let's do this. Let's fight." Word spread quickly that Ash Ridge was looking for allies. By noon, the yard was full of people. Farmers who'd been squeezed by Victor's monopoly. Small ranchers who couldn't compete with his prices. Townspeople who were tired of watching him swallow up the territory piece by piece. Rowan stood on the porch and addressed them all, his voice carrying across the crowd. Most of you know why you're here. Some of you might have guessed. Victor Crow wants my land, and he's willing to destroy everything I've built to get it. Last night, someone, probably his foreman Silas Boone, burned down my barn trying to scare me into selling. Murmurs ran through the crowd, anger and fear in equal measure. I'm not selling, Rowan continued, but I can't fight Victor alone. He's cut off my access to water and grazing land. He's paying off my workers to leave. He's making it impossible for me to run this ranch the way it's meant to be run. So what do you want from us? Someone called out. Partnership, trade, whatever you can offer. If you've got land Victor doesn't control, let me graze my cattle there and I'll pay you fair rates. If you've got supplies I need, trade them for meals here. If you've got nothing but goodwill and a desire to see Victor lose, spread the word that Ash Ridge isn't giving up. A man near the front, a farmer named Peterson who'd been eating at Ash Ridge for weeks, spoke up. Victor finds out we're helping you. He'll come after us too.
Yeah, he will, Rowan admitted, which is why I'm not asking anyone to take risks they can't afford. If you can't help, I understand. But if you can, if you're willing, then we might have a chance at beating him. Silence fell over the crowd. For a long moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke. Then Peterson stepped forward. I got 40 acres of grazing land. Ain't much, but it's yours if you need it. I can spare some hay, another man said. Enough to get you through summer at least.
I'll spread the word in town, a woman called out. Make sure everyone knows what Victor's doing. One by one, people stepped forward with offers. Small things mostly, a few acres here, some supplies there, promises to talk to friends and neighbors. But it added up. By the time the crowd dispersed, Rowan had commitments for enough resources to keep the ranch running for at least a few months. It wasn't a solution, not really. But it was a chance. Mabel watched from this kitchen window, tears streaming down her face. Not from sadness, but from something that felt almost like hope. They were fighting back. Finally, genuinely fighting back. And for the first time since Victor Crow rode onto the property, she believed they might actually win. Victor heard about Rowan's alliance within hours. He was sitting in his office in Black Hollow, reviewing contracts, when one of his men brought him the news. The whole territory's talking about it, the man said. Hale's got farmers and ranchers lining up to help him. They're calling it a coalition against you. Victor set down his pen very carefully. Is that so? Yes, sir, and people are saying things, saying you've gotten too big, too powerful, that someone needs to stand up to you. And they think Rowan Hale is that someone? Victor laughed, but there was no humor in it. That fool doesn't know what he started. He thinks having a few farmers on his side means something. I own half the businesses in this territory. I control the banks, the supply chains, the shipping routes. What's he got? Some land and a fat cook who makes good biscuits? What do you want me to do? Victor thought for a moment. Then he pulled out a piece of paper and started writing. Send a message to Silas Boone. Tell him I'm ready to move to the next phase. If Hale wants to make this personal, we'll make it very personal indeed. How personal? Victor looked up and his eyes were cold. The woman, Mabel Mercer. I want her gone. I don't care how it happens, as long as it looks like an accident. Hale loves her, which means she's his weakness. Remove her, and he'll crumble. The man shifted uncomfortably. Sir, that's murder. That's business. Hale made his choice when he decided to fight me. Now he gets to live with the consequences. Victor went back to his paperwork, already dismissing the conversation. Tell Silas to be creative. Make it hurt. 2 days later, Mabel was alone in the kitchen when she heard someone approaching the house. It was late afternoon. Rowan and Jake had ridden out to meet with some of the farmers who'd offered to help. The other ranch hands were working the fence line on the far side of the property. She was completely alone. The footsteps stopped outside the kitchen door. Then a knock. 3 sharp raps that somehow sounded wrong. Mabel wiped her hands on her apron and opened the door. Silas Boone stood on the porch, hat in hand, looking apologetic. Miss Mercer, he said, sorry to bother you, but I was hoping we could talk. Every instinct Mabel had screamed at her to slam the door and run, but she was tired of being afraid, tired of letting men like Silas dictate her life through fear. What do you want? She asked, not moving from the doorway. I want to apologize. For everything. The cruel words, the sabotage, all of it. Silas looked genuinely contrite. I was angry at Rowan for firing me. Took it out on you when you didn't deserve it. That wasn't right.
No, it wasn't. I know I can't undo what I did, but I was hoping. He paused, as if gathering courage. I was hoping you might put in a good word with Rowan. Help me get my job back. I need the work, Miss Mercer, and I promise I'll do better. Mabel studied him, looking for the lie, looking for any sign that this was a trap. But Silas just stood there, humble and patient, waiting for her answer. I'll talk to him, she said finally, but I can't promise anything. That's all I ask. Thank you. Silas turned to leave, then paused. Oh, one more thing. I noticed smoke coming from the root cellar earlier. Might want to check on it. Could be the ventilation acting up again. He left before Mabel could respond. She stood in the doorway for a moment, uncertainty warring with suspicion. Then she walked around to the back of the house where the root cellar was built into the hillside. The door was standing open. That was wrong. She always kept it closed to maintain the temperature. And there was smoke, thin and gray, drifting up from the stairs that led down into the cellar. Mabel descended carefully, one hand on the wall for balance. The cellar was dark except for the light coming from the open door above. She got halfway down the stairs before she smelled it. Not just smoke. Kerosene. She turned to run back up the stairs and found Silas standing in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun. Nothing personal, he said. Then he threw something into the cellar, a lit torch that hit the ground and exploded into flames. The kerosene he'd poured on the stairs ignited instantly, turning the staircase into a wall of fire. Mabel scrambled backward, tripping over her own feet, landing hard on the dirt floor. The fire was already spreading, eating up the wooden shelves, the dried vegetables, everything that could burn. The root cellar had only one exit, and Silas was standing in it. "Help!" Mabel screamed. "Someone help me!" Silas just watched her for a moment, his face expressionless. Then he slammed the cellar door shut. She heard something heavy being dragged across it, a beam or a piece of timber, wedging it closed from the outside. Mabel was trapped in a burning cellar with no way out. The smoke was already getting thick. She pulled her apron up over her mouth and nose, trying to filter the air, but it wasn't enough. Her eyes burned, her lungs burned, everything burned. She had maybe 5 minutes before the smoke killed her. Maybe less. Think, she told herself. Think. The cellar was maybe 12 feet square, carved into the hillside. The walls were dirt and stone. The ceiling was timber beams covered with sod. There were no windows, no vents, no way out except the door Silas had blocked. She was going to die down here. The realization hit her with shocking clarity. She was going to die, and Rowan would come home to find her body. Would blame himself for not being here, would probably sell the ranch to Victor just to escape the guilt. Everything they'd fought for would be lost. No. The word rose up from somewhere deep inside her, some part of herself that had survived every cruel comment, every rejection, every moment of being told she was too much, too big, too wrong. No, she was not going to die. Not here, not like this. Mabel looked around the cellar, searching for anything she could use. The shelves were burning. The food was burning. The wooden crates in the corner. The wooden crates. She grabbed one and smashed it against the stone wall, breaking it into pieces. Then she grabbed another and another, working as fast as she could, while the smoke got thicker and her lungs screamed for air. She used the broken wood to brace against the ceiling, wedging the pieces between the beams and the floor. Then she climbed up on the pile of crates and started pushing against one of the beams with all her strength. The beam didn't move. She pushed harder, using her legs for leverage, putting every ounce of weight she had into it. The beam shifted slightly. Dirt rained down from the ceiling. Mabel pushed again harder this time and felt something crack. The beam split down the middle. Sod and dirt started pouring through the opening. She pushed one more time, and the entire section of ceiling collapsed inward. Fresh air and sunlight poured through the hole. Mabel grabbed the edges of the opening and pulled herself up, ignoring the pain in her arms, ignoring the smoke still pouring from the cellar below. She hauled herself up through the opening and collapsed on the grass outside, gasping for air. She'd made it. She was alive. But she was also covered in soot and blood. Her dress was singed, and Silas Boone was standing 10 feet away with a gun in his hand. "You're harder to kill than I expected," he said. "Victor said make it look like an accident, but I think we're past that now." He raised the gun, pointing it directly at her heart. Mabel closed her eyes and waited for the shot. It never came. Instead, she heard hoofbeats, fast and hard, coming from the direction of the main road. Then Rowan's voice, raw with fury.
Step away from her. Mabel's eyes snapped open. Rowan was on horseback, maybe 20 yards away, with a rifle pointed at Silas. Jake was right behind him, also armed. Silas swung his gun toward Rowan. This doesn't concern you anymore, Hale. Walk away. Not a chance. Rowan dismounted, keeping the rifle trained on Silas. Put the gun down. Can't do that? Got a job to finish. You shoot her, I shoot you. Then Jake shoots whatever's left. That's not going to end well for you. For a moment, nobody moved. 3 men with guns, all of them willing to use them, all waiting to see who would break first. Then Silas laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You really love her that much? You'd die for a woman who's worth nothing? She's worth everything, Rowan said quietly. And yeah, I'd die for her. But I'd rather just kill you and be done with it. Silas's finger tightened on the trigger. Rowan fired first. The shot echoed across the ranch, sharp and final. Silas dropped like a puppet with its strings cut, the gun falling from his hand. Rowan ran to Mabel, dropping to his knees beside her. Are you hurt? Did he hurt you? I'm fine. I'm okay. She was shaking so hard she could barely speak. He tried to burn me, locked me in the cellar with fire, and I know. Rowan pulled her against his chest, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I saw the smoke from the road, rode as fast as I could. You shot him. I did. Is he dead? Jake was checking Silas's body. Yeah, he's dead. Mabel should have felt something, guilt, horror, relief, but all she felt was exhausted. Victor's going to come after us now, she said. This won't end until one of us is destroyed. I know. Rowan helped her stand, his arm around her waist, supporting her weight. But right now, I don't care about Victor. I care about you. Let's get you inside, get you cleaned up. They were halfway to the house when Jake called out, Boss, we got riders coming. Mabel turned to look and felt her heart sink. A group of men was approaching from the direction of Black Hollow. 20 riders, maybe more, all of them armed. And at the front was Victor Crow himself. He knows, Rowan said quietly. Silas must have sent word before he came here. Victor knows we killed his man. What do we do? Rowan looked at the approaching riders, then at the ranch, then at Mabel, making calculations, weighing options. We stand, he said finally, together. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Mabel nodded, straightening despite the pain and exhaustion. Together. The riders stopped in the yard. Victor dismounted, looking at Silas's body with something that might have been regret. Then he turned to Rowan. You killed my foreman, Victor said. Your foreman tried to murder my cook. I'd say that makes us even. Even? Victor laughed. You think killing Silas makes us even? That man worked for me for 5 years. He was worth 10 of you. He was a coward and a thief. World's better off without him. Victor's expression hardened. You've made your last mistake, Hale. I tried to do this the civilized way. Offered you money, gave you chances to walk away. But you chose to fight. So now we do it my way. Which is what? I'm taking this ranch. Today. Right now. You can leave peacefully or my men will drag you off the property. Your choice. Rowan raised his rifle. I choose option 3. You get the hell off my land before I put a bullet in you. 20 guns pointed at Rowan in response. You're outnumbered, Victor said. Outgunned. Be smart, Hale. Walk away while you still can. No. Then you'll die here. Is that really what you want? To die for a piece of land? I'm not dying for land, Rowan said. I'm dying for home. There's a difference. Victor studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded once, and his men started to advance. This was it. This was the moment where everything ended. Mabel grabbed Rowan's hand, squeezing tight. If they were going to die, at least they'd die together. Then someone shouted from the main road, "Hold it right there!" Everyone turned. A crowd was approaching from the direction of town. Not 20 riders, but hundreds of people on foot, on horseback, in wagons. Farmers and ranchers and townspeople, all of them carrying whatever weapons they could find. Pitchforks and rifles and axes and clubs. Leading them was Peterson, the farmer who'd been first to offer help. He rode up until he was between Victor's men and Ash Ridge Ranch. "You want this land, Crow?" Peterson said. "You'll have to go through all of us." Victor stared at the crowd. and for the first time since arriving, he looked uncertain. "This doesn't concern you people." "The hell it doesn't," someone called out. "You've been squeezing this territory for years, taking what you want, hurting who you please. Well, we're done letting you. You want a war? I'll give you a war." "No." Rowan stepped forward, his voice carrying across the yard. "You'll give us nothing, because you're outnumbered and outgunned, and you know it. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to ride back to Black Hollow, you're going to forget about Ash Ridge, and you're going to leave us alone. And if I don't, then we burn down everything you've built, just like you tried to burn down mine. We bankrupt you, destroy you, make you wish you'd never heard of this territory. Your choice." Victor looked at his men, then at the crowd, then back at Rowan, calculations running behind his eyes. Finally, he nodded once. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah," Rowan replied. "It is." Victor mounted his horse and rode away, his men following. They disappeared down the road toward town, leaving Ash Ridge Ranch in peace. The crowd erupted in cheers. People swarmed the yard, congratulating Rowan, thanking Mabel, celebrating the victory like it was the end of a war. And maybe it was. Rowan pulled Mabel close, kissing her forehead. "We did it. We did it," she echoed. Around them, the ranch was battered but standing. The barn was gone, Silas was dead, and everything they'd built was fragile as glass. But they'd survived, together. The celebration lasted until well after dark. People who'd come to defend Ash Ridge stayed to share food and stories, turning the ranch yard into something that looked almost like a festival. Someone brought out a fiddle. Someone else produced a jug of whiskey that got passed around until it was empty. Children ran between the adults, laughing and playing like this was just another evening instead of the end of something that could have destroyed them all. Mabel stood on the porch watching it all, still wearing her burned dress, still covered in soot and dirt. She should have gone inside to clean up, should have changed clothes and washed her face and tried to look presentable, but she couldn't bring herself to move, couldn't quite believe that it was over, that Victor Crow had actually backed down, that she was still alive. Rowan found her there an hour later, standing alone while the party continued without her. "You should eat something," he said, offering her a plate of food that someone had brought. "Not hungry?" "Mabel, I killed a man today." The words came out flat, emotionless. "Or you killed him for me. I'm not sure which is worse." Rowan set down the plate and moved closer. "Silas made his choice. He came here to murder you. What happened to him is on him, not us." "But he's still dead. And I should feel something about that, shouldn't I? Guilt or horror or something. But all I feel is tired." "That's normal. You're in shock." "Am I?" Mabel finally turned to look at him. "Or am I just a terrible person who's relieved that someone who tried to kill me is dead?" "You're not a terrible person. You're a person who survived. There's a difference." Mabel wanted to believe him, wanted to accept that simple truth and move on. But part of her, the part that had spent her whole life being told she was too much, too wrong, too everything, couldn't quite let it go. "What if Victor comes back?" she asked quietly. "What if this isn't really over?" "Then we'll deal with it. Together. Same as we did today." Rowan took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "But I don't think he's coming back. He lost today. Lost badly. And men like Victor don't risk losing twice." "You sound sure." "I'm sure. Because we're not alone anymore. You saw those people out there. They didn't come just to help us. They came to help themselves. To finally stand up to someone who's been pushing them around for years. That's bigger than just our ranch. That's a whole territory saying enough is enough." Mabel looked out at the crowd again, seeing them with new eyes. Rowan was right. These weren't just neighbors helping neighbors. This was a community that had found its spine. And she'd helped make that happen. The thought settled something inside her, made the exhaustion a little more bearable. "I need to clean up," she said finally, "and probably sleep for about a week." "Sounds like a plan." Rowan kissed her temple. "But first, there's something I need to do." He led her down off the porch and into the crowd. People parted to let them through, and Mabel realized they were heading for the center of the yard where most of the gathering was concentrated. Rowan raised his voice, calling for attention. "Can I have everyone's attention for a minute?" The fiddle music stopped. Conversations died. All eyes turned to them. Mabel felt her stomach drop. "Rowan, what are you doing?" "Something I should have done weeks ago," he said. Then to the crowd, Most of you know by now what happened today. Victor Crow tried to take this ranch by force. His foreman tried to kill Mabel, and all of you showed up to stop it from happening. I can't thank you enough for that." Murmurs of acknowledgement ran through the crowd. "But there's something else you should know," Rowan continued. "Something I haven't said out loud because I was too stubborn or too scared or too stuck in my own grief to admit it. This woman," he squeezed Mabel's hand, "saved my life. Not today, though she did that too, but months ago when she walked onto this ranch and reminded me what it felt like to be alive, to care about something, to want something beyond just surviving another day." Mabel's eyes were burning. "Rowan, you don't have to,
Yeah, I do." He turned to face her fully. "You once asked me if I would have noticed you sooner if you looked different, and I didn't answer because I was trying to be honest. The truth is, I don't know if I would have noticed you sooner, but I know with absolute certainty that the woman I love isn't the one I would have noticed. She's the one who fed my men when they were hungry, who saved a dying calf because she couldn't stand the thought of letting it suffer, who stood up to Victor Crow and Silas Boone and everyone else who tried to make her small. That woman, the one standing right here, is the only one I want." He dropped to one knee. The crowd gasped. Mabel's hands flew to her mouth. "I don't have a ring," Rowan said. "Don't have much of anything right now except a ranch that's falling apart, and a barn that needs rebuilding, and about 1,000 problems I haven't figured out how to solve yet. But I've got love, and I've got a future that looks a hell of a lot better with you in it than without. So I'm asking," his voice cracked, "will you marry me, Mabel Mercer? Will you take a broken cowboy and a dying ranch and help me turn them into something worth having?" Mabel was crying openly now, tears cutting tracks through the soot on her face. 1,000 reasons to say no ran through her head. They'd known each other less than a year. They'd been through trauma together, which wasn't the same as building a real relationship. She was still the fat cook from Black Hollow, and he was still the rancher everyone feared, and marriage wouldn't change those fundamental truths. But she'd spent her whole life listening to reasons why things wouldn't work, why she couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't ever be enough. And she was done listening to those voices. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Rowan surged to his feet and kissed her in front of everyone, and the crowd erupted in cheers so loud they probably heard it in Black Hollow. When they finally broke apart, both of them were laughing and crying at the same time. "You know everyone's going to talk," Mabel said. "Going to say you're making a mistake, that you could do better. Let them talk. I know what I've got. A fat wife who can't even fit into normal dresses? A strong wife who survived being burned alive and came out swinging. That's what I've got, and that's everything." Someone started up the fiddle again, faster this time, and suddenly people were dancing. Jake grabbed a widow from town and spun her around. Peterson was attempting to teach his kids some kind of complicated step. Even the old man who'd been living rough was clapping along to the music. Rowan pulled Mabel into the dance, and despite everything, despite the burns and the exhaustion and the fact that neither of them knew how to dance properly, they moved together like they'd been doing it for years. "I love you," Mabel said, the words coming easier now that she'd said them once. "I love you too," Rowan replied, "and I'm going to keep saying it until you believe it." "I believe it." "Good, because I'm not stopping." They danced until Mabel's feet hurt and Rowan's back ached, and the music finally wound down. People started leaving, heading back to their homes and their lives, but not before promising to return, to help rebuild the barn, to continue the alliance they'd formed. By the time the last wagon rolled away, it was well past midnight. Jake was the last to leave, heading for the bunkhouse with a tired smile. "Congratulations, boss. You picked a good one." "I know. You gonna rebuild? The barn, I mean." "Yeah. Bigger this time. Better. Something that can hold everything we're trying to do here. We're gonna need more hands. Can't run a ranch this size with just 3 men. I'll put out word tomorrow. See who wants to work." Jake nodded and headed off, leaving Rowan and Mabel alone in the quiet yard. They stood there for a moment, just breathing in the night air. The ranch looked different in the moonlight, smaller somehow, but also more solid, more real. "Come on," Rowan said finally. "Let's go inside. You need rest." Mabel let him lead her into the house and up to his room. Not the cook's quarters where she'd been sleeping, but his actual bedroom that she'd never been in before.
It was sparse and masculine, with a bed that looked big enough for two. "Is this appropriate?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. "Us being in here together before we're married?" "Don't care," Rowan said. "I almost lost you today. I'm not spending another night apart, not unless you want to." Mabel thought about protesting, about doing the proper thing and going to her own room. Then she thought about Silas pointing that gun at her, about how close she'd come to dying without ever knowing what it was like to wake up next to someone who loved her. "I don't want to," she said. "I want to stay here." They helped each other undress, not in a romantic way, but in the exhausted, practical way of two people who'd been through hell together. Rowan's hands were gentle as he helped her out of the ruined dress. Mabel's fingers fumbled with the buttons on his shirt. By the time they collapsed into bed, they were both wearing underclothes and nothing else. Rowan pulled her against his chest, and Mabel went willingly, tucking herself into the curve of his body. He was warm and solid and alive, and that was all that mattered. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" "For seeing me. For choosing me. For everything." Rowan's arms tightened around her. "Thank you for not giving up. On me, on this ranch, on any of it. I don't know where I'd be if you hadn't walked through that door 6 months ago, but I know it wouldn't be anywhere good." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for the first time in 6 years, Rowan didn't dream about Anna. Didn't wake up reaching for someone who wasn't there. He just slept, deep and dreamless and peaceful. The next morning started the way every morning at Ash Ridge started, with Mabel in the kitchen making breakfast. But this time, Rowan was right there with her, helping, fumbling with the biscuit dough the way she'd taught him months ago, still not quite getting it right but trying anyway. "You're using too much pressure," Mabel said, watching him work. "I'm barely touching it." "You're mashing it. There's a difference." We've had this conversation before. "And you still haven't learned." But she was smiling when she said it. Jake came in while they were cooking, took one look at them working side by side, and grinned. "This is going to take some getting used to." "What is?" Rowan asked. "You being happy. Boss, I've worked here for 4 years, and I ain't never seen you smile this much. It's weird." "Get used to it," Mabel said. "He's stuck with me now." "Thank God for that. Maybe now the food will stay good." They ate breakfast together, just the 3 of them, plus the 2 remaining ranch hands. It was quiet and comfortable, and for the first time since the fire, things felt almost normal. After breakfast, Rowan and Jake rode out to survey the damage to the ranch. What they found wasn't encouraging: fences down in multiple places, cattle scattered across the territory, equipment destroyed or missing. "It's going to take months to fix all this," Jake said, surveying a section of fence that had been deliberately cut. "Maybe longer." "Then we'll take months," Rowan said. "We've got time now. Victor's not breathing down our necks. We can rebuild properly." "You really think he's done?" "Man like that doesn't give up easy. Man like that knows when he's beaten. And we beat him. In front of half the territory, we proved he's not invincible. That's going to stick with him." Jake didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. They spent the rest of the day working fence line, and by evening, Rowan's hands were torn up and his back was screaming. But it was good pain, productive pain, the kind that came from building something instead of just watching it fall apart. When he got back to the house, he found Mabel in the kitchen surrounded by women from town. They'd come to help, bringing fabric for new curtains, dishes to replace the ones broken in the fire, food supplies to restock the pantry. "We heard about the engagement," one of them said, a woman named Sarah who ran the general store. "Figured you could use some help getting ready." "Ready for what?" Mabel asked. "The wedding, of course, unless you're planning to get married in that burned dress." Mabel looked down at herself. She'd changed into a clean dress that morning, but it was old and patched and thoroughly unsuitable for a wedding. "I hadn't really thought about it," she admitted. "Well, we have." Sarah pulled out a bolt of cream-colored fabric. "This came in last month. Nobody's bought it yet. I figured maybe, if you want it, we could make you something proper to wear." Mabel touched the fabric with trembling fingers. It was beautiful, too beautiful for someone like her. "I can't afford this," she said quietly. "It's a gift, from all of us. Consider it payment for all the meals you've cooked." Sarah smiled. "Besides, the whole territory is going to want to see this wedding. Might as well give them something worth looking at." Over the next 3 weeks, Ash Ridge transformed. Men from the surrounding farms came to help rebuild the barn. They brought lumber and nails and expertise, working from dawn until dark. The structure that rose from the ashes was bigger than the original, tall enough to store hay for winter, wide enough to shelter twice as many animals. Women came to help prepare the house. They scrubbed and painted and mended, turning the dark, empty space into something that felt lived in. Someone donated furniture, someone else brought rugs. By the end of it, the house looked more like a home than it had since Anna died, and through it all, Mabel cooked. She fed the workers who came to help, fed the families who'd supported them, fed anyone who showed up hungry and left satisfied. The kitchen became the heart of the ranch in a way it never had been before. People gathered there to talk and laugh and share stories. It stopped being just a place where food was prepared and became something more. A gathering place, a meeting hall, a symbol of what Ash Ridge was becoming. One evening, about 2 weeks before the wedding, Rowan found Mabel standing in the kitchen doorway, looking out at the yard where workers were putting finishing touches on the new barn. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, echoing her words from weeks ago. "I was just thinking about my mother," Mabel said, "about what she'd say if she could see this. Me getting married, all these people working together, everything we've built. She'd be proud." "Would she? I'm not sure. I spent so much of my life disappointing people, being too much, too big, too so...
Stop. Rowan turned her to face him. "Your mother's letter, the one you keep in your apron pocket. I've seen you reading it when you think nobody's watching. What does it say?" Mabel hesitated, then pulled out the worn piece of paper and handed it to him. Rowan read it slowly, and when he finished, his eyes were wet.
"She knew," he said. "She knew exactly who you were and what you were capable of. And she was right. You do make cold places warm. You do take broken things and put them back together. You did all of that here." "I had help." "Yeah, you did, but you started it. You were the spark that lit the fire." He handed the letter back. "Your mother would be proud, and so am I." Mabel tucked the letter away and kissed him. Not desperately like before, but softly, contentedly. "I love you," she said. "I love you too. And in 2 weeks, I get to tell everyone that officially." "You nervous?" "Terrified. I'm marrying the strongest woman in Wyoming." "That's intimidating," Mabel laughed. "You're marrying a cook who can barely dance and takes up too much space." "No," Rowan said firmly. "I'm marrying a woman who survived being burned alive, who stood up to the most powerful man in the territory, and who makes the best damn biscuits I've ever tasted. That's what I'm getting." "Those are pretty good biscuits." "They really are." The wedding took place on a Saturday in early summer. The entire territory showed up. Farmers and ranchers and townspeople, all dressed in their best clothes, all gathered in the yard of Ash Ridge Ranch to witness something that most of them had thought would never happen. Rowan Hale, the coldest cowboy in 3 territories, was getting married again. And his bride was Mabel Mercer, the fat cook nobody wanted. Except everyone wanted her now. Wanted to shake her hand, congratulate her, thank her for the meals she'd cooked and the stand she'd helped them make against Victor Crow. The ceremony itself was simple. No fancy church, no elaborate decorations. Just a preacher from Black Hollow standing under the new barn's overhang, with Rowan and Mabel in front of him, and half the territory bearing witness. Mabel wore the dress the women had made for her, cream-colored fabric with simple lines that fit her body properly instead of trying to hide it. Her hair was pulled back but not severely, and someone had woven wildflowers through it. She looked beautiful, not in the conventional way that people usually meant when they said that word, but in the way that mattered, the way that came from being genuinely, completely herself. Rowan wore his best suit, the one he'd worn to Anna's funeral 6 years ago. He'd thought about buying something new but decided against it. This suit represented his past, represented grief and loss and everything he'd survived. And now he was wearing it to start something new. The preacher asked the traditional questions. Rowan and Mabel gave the traditional answers. And when the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," Rowan did, in front of everyone, without hesitation, without shame. The crowd erupted in applause. The reception lasted all day and well into the night. Tables had been set up across the yard, loaded with food that people had brought to share. Someone brought a pig to roast. Someone else brought vegetables from their garden. There was enough food to feed an army, and through it all, Mabel and Rowan moved together, greeting guests, accepting congratulations, being more genuinely happy than either of them had been in years. Jake pulled Rowan aside at one point, handing him a glass of whiskey. You did good, boss. Real good. Thanks for sticking around, for not leaving when things got bad. Where else was I going to go? You pay terribly, but the food's amazing and the company ain't half bad. Jake grinned. Besides, someone had to make sure you didn't screw this up. Appreciate that. You really love her? It's not just, I don't know, loneliness or convenience? Rowan looked across the yard to where Mabel was talking with Sarah and some of the other women. She was laughing at something, her whole face lit up with joy. I really love her, Rowan said. More than I thought I could love anyone after Anna died. And it's not the same, doesn't replace what I had before. But it's real. And it's enough. Jake nodded, satisfied. Good. Because that woman deserves someone who sees her, really sees her, and you do. Yeah, I do. As the sun set and the party continued, Rowan pulled Mabel away from the crowd and led her toward the hill overlooking the ranch, the place where Anna was buried, marked by a simple stone. Is this weird? Mabel asked quietly. Bringing me here today? Maybe. Probably. But I needed to do this. Rowan knelt beside the grave, putting his hand on the stone. Hey, Anna. I know you can't hear me. Or maybe you can and you're watching all this thinking I've lost my mind, but I wanted to tell you, his voice cracked. I wanted to tell you I'm okay now, finally. After 6 years of barely surviving, I'm actually okay. Mabel knelt beside him, taking his other hand. This is Mabel, Rowan continued. Well, you probably know already if you've been watching. She saved me, saved this ranch, saved everything you and I built together, and I know you'd like her. Know you'd appreciate what she's done here. Tears were running down his face now, but he didn't try to stop them. I'm always going to love you. That doesn't change. But I'm going to love her too. And I hope, wherever you are, you're okay with that. Hope you understand that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. It just means living. Mabel was crying too, her head resting on his shoulder. They sat there for a long time, the three of them, past, present, and future, all existing in the same space for one quiet moment. Finally, Rowan stood and helped Mabel to her feet. They walked back to the party hand in hand, and nobody asked where they'd been. Some things didn't need explaining. The party wound down around midnight. People said their goodbyes, promising to visit, to help with the harvest, to continue being part of the community they'd built together. When the last guest left, Rowan and Mabel stood alone in the yard, surveying the aftermath. We should clean up, Mabel said. Tomorrow. Tonight we just... He pulled her close. Tonight we just be married. They went inside, and for the first time, Mabel walked into the bedroom she now shared with Rowan as his wife. It felt different somehow, more permanent, more real. I'm scared, she admitted as they got ready for bed. Of what? That I'll wake up, and this will all be a dream. That I'll still be the fat cook in Black Hollow with a dying mother and no future. That none of this really happened. Rowan crossed the room and took her face in his hands. This is real. We're real. And you're not going anywhere except right here with me for as long as we both live. You understand? I'm trying to. Then let me help you understand. He kissed her, and this time there was no urgency, no desperation. Just two people who'd found each other against all odds, choosing to be together. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other in the darkness. And when it was over, they lay tangled together, breathing hard, feeling more complete than either of them had in years. I love you, Mabel whispered. I love you too, Rowan replied, and I'm going to keep saying it until you believe it. I believe it. Good, because I'm not stopping anyway. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and the house that had been so cold for so long finally felt warm again. The months that followed established a new rhythm at Ash Ridge Ranch. More workers arrived, drawn by word of what had happened. Young men looking for honest work and fair pay. Older men who'd been pushed out of other ranches and needed a second chance. Even a few women who wanted to work in the kitchen with Mabel, learning her techniques and helping feed the growing operation. The barn filled with animals. The fields filled with cattle. The house filled with noise and laughter and life. Mabel's cooking became legendary across the territory. People traveled from 3 counties away just to eat at her table. She started teaching classes, showing other women how to make bread and preserve food and create meals that made people feel cared for. And through it all, she never stopped being herself. Never tried to become smaller or quieter or more acceptable. She took up space the way her mother had told her to, and the world made room for her. One evening, almost a year after the wedding, Rowan found her in the kitchen kneading bread dough. She was humming to herself, lost in the rhythm of the work, and she didn't hear him approach. He watched her for a moment, marveling at how much had changed. This woman who'd walked onto his dying ranch with nothing but determination and a talent for cooking had transformed everything, had turned Ash Ridge from a graveyard into something that felt almost like paradise. "You're staring," Mabel said without turning around. "How'd you know?" "I can feel it. You always stare when you think I'm not paying attention." Rowan crossed the kitchen and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Can't help it. Still can't believe you're real." "Very real. Also very covered in flour, so if you don't want to be covered too, you should probably let go." "Don't care about flour." Mabel leaned back against him, still working the dough. "You happy?" "Yeah, you?" "Yeah." "Good." He kissed her neck. "Because I have news." "What kind of news?" "The kind where we might need to build another addition onto the house." Mabel's hands stilled. She turned in his arms to look at him. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "Depends. Are you pregnant?" She stared at him for a long moment. Then she started crying, big, messy tears that had nothing to do with sadness. "I think so. I wasn't sure. Didn't want to say anything until I was certain. How did you know?" "You've been tired, emotional, and you keep touching your stomach when you think nobody's watching." Rowan wiped her tears with his thumb. "We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby." He picked her up and spun her around, laughing like a madman. When he set her down, they were both grinning so hard their faces hurt. "Anna would have loved this," Mabel said quietly. "Would have loved knowing that this house has children in it again." "Yeah, she would have." Rowan pulled Mabel close. "And so do I. Love it, I mean. Love you. Love what we're building here." "Pretty good, isn't it?" "It's better than good. It's home." The baby was born the following spring, a girl with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn chin. They named her Margaret, after Mabel's mother, and from the moment she arrived, she filled the house with noise. 2 years later, a boy followed, then another girl, then twins who nobody expected but everyone loved anyway. Ash Ridge Ranch became known as the warmest place in Wyoming, the place where strangers were welcomed and fed, where families came to celebrate and mourn and exist, where the coffee was always hot and the door was always open. And at the center of it all was Mabel, not the fat cook anymore, not the woman nobody wanted, but Mabel Hale, baker, mother, wife, and the soul of a ranch that had almost died but refused to stay dead. She never forgot what it felt like to be invisible, never forgot the years of being told she was too much. And because she never forgot, she made sure nobody who came to her table ever felt that way. Everyone was welcome. Everyone was seen. Everyone mattered. That was the gift her mother had given her, the understanding that making people feel valued was worth more than gold. And it was the gift she passed on to her children, who grew up learning that strength came in all sizes, that love wasn't about appearance, and that the best way to change the world was to feed it. Rowan watched his family grow and his ranch thrive, and sometimes, in quiet moments, he'd think about the man he used to be, the cold, broken cowboy who'd given up on life. That man was gone, buried alongside his grief and his isolation. In his place was someone new, someone who laughed with his children and kissed his wife and believed that tomorrow might actually be better than today. And when people asked him how he'd survived, how he'd gone from barely living to genuinely thriving, he always gave the same answer. "I let someone in, someone who refused to let me stay broken, and she loved me back to life." On warm summer evenings, when the work was done and the children were in bed, Rowan and Mabel would sit on the porch together. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just existed in comfortable silence. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Mabel asked one such evening. "What's that?" "That first morning I came here. How terrified I was. How certain I was that you'd send me away." "Almost did," Rowan admitted. "You looked like you couldn't handle the work." "I looked like I was dying inside and desperately trying to hide it." "Yeah, that too." He took her hand. "Glad I didn't send you away." "Me too." She squeezed his fingers. "You saved me, you know. Gave me a place to belong when I thought I'd never belong anywhere." Pretty sure it was the other way around. "Maybe we saved each other." "Maybe. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set over the mountains. The ranch spread out before them, bigger now, busier, full of life and possibility. "Rowan?" Mabel said eventually. "Yeah? Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. For choosing me. For building this life with me." Rowan pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Best decision I ever made." And he meant it, because the truth, the real truth that took him 6 years to understand, was that salvation didn't come from being perfect. It came from letting someone imperfect love you anyway. Mabel was big and loud and took up space in a world that wanted her to be small and quiet and invisible. And Rowan loved her not in spite of those things, but because of them. Because she taught him that taking up space wasn't a crime, that being broken didn't mean being worthless, that love could grow in the most unlikely places if you were brave enough to let it. The harsh frontier had tried to break them both. Instead, it gave them each other. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Years later, when Mabel was old and her children had children of their own, someone asked her what the secret was. "How did you turn a dying ranch into a legacy? How did you survive when everyone said you'd fail?" She thought about it for a long time. Then she pulled out a worn letter from her apron pocket, the same letter her mother had written decades ago.
"My mother told me to take up space," Mabel said, "to be big and loud and everything the world said I shouldn't be, and I did. Not because it was easy, but because the alternative was disappearing." "That's it? Just take up space?" "That's it. Take up space, love hard, feed people, and never ever let anyone convince you that you're too much. Because the right people, the ones who matter, will always think you're exactly enough."
It was the truth she had learned on a dying ranch in Wyoming territory. The truth she'd lived every day since. The truth she'd pass on to anyone who needed to hear it. You are enough. You have always been enough. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve you.